All right, folks, it is that time of year. It's almost October, it's late September. The leaves are turning, the acorns are falling, got a little rain out there. And what's missing off this rack is Nana. That's because we are about to go kayak camping. So I've had a ton of requests to do a video on how I'm doing kayak camping as far as gear and how I pack the boat nowadays. Not much has changed since the last video, but it's several years old and dated. And I figured I would revisit that today and show you everything we got going on, how I pack it, where I pack it, exactly what I'm bringing. And this will change a little bit depending on the weather, the distance, that sort of thing, where we're gonna be. But basically this is everything I use when I'm kayak camping. So I'm heading out in the morning with Brian, Greg, Dirt Dauber, Iowa Matt, and Bobby Darren. We're about to go hit the Catawba River. Here's my loadout for a 3-day camping trip. Check it out. Let me basically just start from the front and work to the rear. I'll show you everything I got going on with the boat. The first thing I have, you may have noticed, is a compass. I don't use it all that often, but when I need it, it's always there and very handy. So the Yukon Expedition has a double hatch, has a plastic cover with a neoprene top. Okay, there's a couple things you're gonna need to think about when you're packing your boat, and the number one thing you need to think about is weight. You don't want to stuff the front with a lot of heavy items because that's going to drop the bow. It's going to make your boat not perform the way you want it to. You want it to be pretty much even with a little edge to the weight in the back if you have to choose. Now you want all the heaviness, the heavy items, to be kind of towards the center of the boat, not out here on the ends, whether it be in the front or the back. So the further out to the end of the boat you go, you want lighter items. So you don't want weight out there, that way you can turn and maneuver a lot better. So in the front of my boat, I've got my jet boil, and then this is a woobie, which is like a blanket. I always take a woobie on a camping trip. The cordage for my tarp, and you can kind of start packing things you're gonna use together because that makes sense. I got the footprint for underneath my hammock. And then here I have my hammock itself. Up in the nose, I have a bunch of freeze-dried food that I'm gonna eat on the trip. And that's basically everything I've got in the front of my kayak. The hammock I'm taking is a War Bonnet Blackbird, and it's a fantastic hammock. I've got a video up on that if you wanna see it. The tarp I'm taking this weekend is my UGQ Winter Dream. That's been my go-to here for about a year. I just really like that tarp. Jet boil, not a whole lot going on there. And that's pretty much the front compartment. I may stuff some snacks or some other little things like that in there that I can get to pretty easily during the day when I take a break. But I really don't clog that up with a lot of weight. And I want to have those items that I need together kind of up front. When I land, I want to set up a tarp. Everything I need to set up the tarp and the hammock is right here, and it takes no time to do that. All right, now we'll move on to this front deck area of the boat. So start off with my thermos. Got a little hydro flask here for any drinks I want, hot or cold on the river. That works great. Here mounted in front of or right behind the deck bag is a Scotty mount that holds my GoPro, and that'll be tethered off to this little locking beaner with that tether. I'm using the GoPro now, so you'll just have to trust me, that's where it goes. This can pop out if you ever want to remove it, film with it, whatever you want to do. That's there, super easy. The Scotty mount has worked out great over the years, and meant to take that out so I can show you something. Right behind the Scotty mount, you'll see my eTrex 20, a Garmin eTrex 20. I keep that on, and I've arranged my dashboard in such a way that kind of shows me my speed, moving speed. Pardon the disruption. So this is my, it's everywhere. So right behind the Scotty mount here is my Garmin eTrex 20. And this kind of has a little mount that kind of allows me to adjust, and I can turn it a couple different ways. But I keep my dashboard on all day, so I can always look up there and see the distance I've gone, the speed I'm currently traveling, max speed, you know, kind of see the track if I want to, but I keep it on the dash. That way I can just monitor what we're doing so I can forecast when we're getting to a waypoint or how far we've been going, or do we need to pick up the pace, or are we good to just relax? very crucial tool when you're actually doing a long trip and you're trying to stay on a schedule or itinerary of where you want to be by the end of the day, midday. If you're trying to hit a restaurant by lunch, that might help you from getting too hungry or from getting there too soon. You know, if you have a little time, it's just one of these tools I really enjoy. Stays right there, does a fantastic job. So next right here, the obvious deck bag, and this is an overboard deck bag. I love it. I've had a different one for almost 10 years. I did a bunch of miles with the other one. I looked and saw what was out there, did not see anything better, so I bought another one. And so this will be the first trip with the new deck bag, and virtually exactly the same as the old. No complaints. Got a little waterproof zipper up top. I'll normally put my phone up in here so I can access it during the day. Inside, I have a Viking Tactics tactical med kit. That's for some serious injuries. Also a tourniquet. If anyone gets crazy in the camp with a hatchet or a knife or something and is actually bleeding out, you'll be glad you had a tourniquet. If your medical training doesn't allow you to use that in good conscience, do what you want to do, but I would have no problem throwing a tourniquet on somebody who is bleeding profusely and we couldn't stop it. Then we have a little medical bag. Not a big deal. Behind that, a hammock with some homemade cordage. So that's kind of like a brake hammock. If we just stop and we don't want to pull everything out, I don't want to get to my other hammock, but I want to sit and eat lunch or take a little nap, I've got a little hammock, easily available, readily accessible, ready to go. Even though I'm much less likely to use the medical stuff, I put that up front so I can get to it quicker if need be. If someone else has a medical condition that requires special medicine or, you know, an EpiPen or something, I might have that right here too. And everyone on the trip will know where all this stuff is in case something happens to me, or if I'm not around, or if I need them to get the stuff while I'm attending to somebody, anything like that. Okay, so right behind the deck bag and all this gadgetry with the GPS and the GoPro is a double carabinered 550 cord length of rope. And I keep it tight in there because I don't want it catching on a lot of stuff. The more loose rope you have everywhere, it can be a snag hazard, and you kind of watch that. But I like deck lines for the big boats on rivers. Gives you something to grab no matter where the boat's coming at you. And this is about 3 feet of rope, not that long. Oftentimes when we tie boats up along rivers, there's just room for one boat to get to the root or the post or whatever we're tying off to. And this allows us to just simply click into a deck line, run it through the front grab loops or whatever else on all the boats, and you can usually get 4 or 5 other boats tied to the one. It has some other uses. I don't recommend towing anything attached to you or your boat unless you know how to do that and you have a quick release on a rescue vest. And that's called a cowtail, or there's some other ways to do that. Pretty controversial because if you do it wrong, you're putting yourself in grave danger. So before you get too crazy with that, just know you need to be real careful. You need to get some training. There's a lot of other uses for this, but it's a quick tie off, stays tucked out of the way like that. If I need it, I can get it. It's kind of neat. All right, now we're to the cockpit area, the working area of the boat, where I'll be sitting as I paddle. And I'll be using a RPC3 Performance Tour paddle. The blade shape is much like a whitewater paddle, but it's just a full carbon layup, touring layup with an aggressive blade. And for what I do, that's perfect. I don't need a full-on whitewater paddle. It would be too heavy. I don't need a full-on touring paddle because I would like a little more blade. I like a wing paddle if I'm in the ocean going nothing but straight, but as soon as you get into a river and you need to use an active blade, kind of technique style where you're working and feathering your blade, the wing paddles don't really work great for that at all. So that's why I don't use a wing. This allows me to get a bigger bite versus a standard touring paddle, and it just works out perfect. All right, if I'm anywhere near rapids, I'll have a helmet, and I don't bring my full face on this kind of stuff because I'm likely not going to be in that kind of environment. If I flip in this boat, I will stay in because I'll lock my knees and I'll roll up. The skirt I'm using will not hold me in the boat like a neoprene skirt will on a whitewater boat. Nevertheless, I don't plan on coming out. I plan on rolling. And if that's the scenario, you need a helmet on, because it doesn't take much to hit your head on a rock and ruin your whole day or adventure, knock you out, give you a gash, need some stitches. Wear a helmet, always a great idea. If you're in 100 feet of water on a lake, it's obviously not necessary. If you're in the middle of the ocean, a helmet is not necessary. But if you're on any kind of river that's going to be posing a flip hazard and there's a lot of rocks around, put a brain bucket on. That way you can have good stories later and not forget what happened to you because you were knocked out. And I talked about it just now, but this is the skirt. This is a Seals Sneak. 1.7 fits this cockpit just right. And it is not the super performance oriented skirt I use whitewater paddling. It's got a zipper entry so I can reach down in there, grab a snack or a map or anything that I need while I'm paddling. A couple little pockets on the outside. It's got a little ribbed piece of plastic that kind of holds the deck up so water doesn't pool down. It's got a little suspenders on there, and unless I'm extremely hot and just don't care, I will almost always wear this because it keeps all the splash out. The Yukon is a little bit of a wet boat in that it goes through features, not over them. And that gives you a lot more control and a lot more downriver speed and agility. You're also going to be a little bit more wet than a boat that rides over everything with a big flared upturned bow. Just know that the deck bag also helps deflect a lot of the water, but you'll probably want a skirt if you're doing any kind of long distance trip in a Yukon. For my touring, I use an Astral V8, and the reason is it has a high back with this mesh area, allows it to breathe, but it also allows my back to sit against the high back seat without having a bunch of padding interfering with the seat back, which becomes very uncomfortable, and it causes a lot of people to want to take this off because they can't get comfortable. So you do need a life vest, you do need a PFD. Get the proper one. In this case, it's all I need. It allows me to sit comfortably all day. I don't even know this thing's on there. And great company, Astral. I use Astral for all my whitewater needs. I've got my kids in Astral. It's a great PFD. Astral V8. In the Astral V8, I have a couple things. Sometimes I bring these if I'm doing a lot of paddling, like flat water. Sometimes I don't. My hands don't really need them, but if you do a week-long venture and all you're doing is paddling because you're on some flat water, you're going to wish you had gloves because you're going to be wearing the skin off the tops of your thumbs in those areas. I learned that on my way to the coast, 240 miles. I was duct taping my hands. First purchase I made when I got home. In the same pocket, I have a small fire starter that is waterproof. Just flick it a couple times, you got a flame. That's on my person because you never know where you'll be when you need to start a fire, or if you'll be with your boat even. So I always have that fire starter. My dad gave that to me years back, and it's been the perfect little tool. In the other side of my vest, I have a rescue link. That's a rescue beacon. Basically pop that, lift it up, and if I hit the power button, everyone in the world is coming to my location and they have all my information. My wife gets a notification, another couple people get a notification. Swift Water Rescue Team, Sheriff's Department, Coast Guard, everybody's getting this. They get my grid, and this will save your life if you're in an extreme emergency and you need to be extracted, or someone in your crew does. If you ever use the ACR Rescue Link, they will send you a free one in return. So it's a one-use thing. If you use it, they give you a new one. Can't beat that. This can legitimately save your life. It works with geosynchronous satellites, which is the ones that stay in place as the Earth rotates. They rotate with it. And they work with orbiting satellites. You're likely, if anything's going to get a signal, these guys will. It's not a device meant to coordinate your location with everybody all the time, like a Spot or some of those others, but just look and see what's out there. There's some good stuff. Blistex, because when you're on the water all day for a few days, sometimes your lips take a beating. And then I also have these little rudder attachments and cable swages for rudder repair. And If you have a Yukon and the rudder goes out, you're in trouble because they don't like to go straight, which is what gives them their ability to handle the whitewater. But in a Yukon expedition, you definitely want your rudder to be working all the time if you're on any kind of flat water. So that's what I keep on my person in my PFD. Most trips like this, I'll be wearing either Crocs or river booties. As it gets a little colder, I start migrating to the river booty because I can wear my dry suit, and this will protect the feet of my dry suit a little better than my Crocs will. But just have some quality footwear if you're on a dangerous river. Also in here is my cockpit cover. Keeps critters and bugs and snakes out of your cockpit. It also keeps your cockpit dry if you're traveling. You may want one of these, you may not. It's in there. My throw bag and my rescue PFD on my whitewater. This is sitting right here, and I pop a clip and I pull it out. It's always on my person. I don't have that PFD when I do the touring, but this is always here in my lap. There's also a length of rope with a carabiner. I can use that for walking the boats through shallow water. There's also a secondary throw bag, as well as a throw bag that will be, I've got it in a box because someone else is going to be having it in the boat. There's another throw bag. I make sure at least another person or two have throw bags while on the river. Very important. I also have a paddling hat for if the sun or the rain gets annoying. Throw that on there. And a dry top, not gasketed. So this one is for comfort. It's more of a splash top. It's not a dry top. But if it's raining or if you're going through a little bit of splashy area, that will keep you dry if you don't need full-on immersion wear. And then since we're paddling through a lake, I have my sail, which everyone makes fun of me for. But when the wind's blowing and you're on some flat water, it's blowing the right direction, you throw that up, everybody is happy and everybody is suddenly your friend and wants to be real close to your kayak holding on, because you'll be going down the river pretty fast. The last thing I have up here is my suitcase. And that's a ridiculously big box, but when you're running a YouTube channel and you need 3 GoPros, phone, some other electronics, camera, you need all that to be running, you have to power that somehow. And inside here are all my gadgetry and power banks, the voltaic battery system for charging. This cord will be running from my solar panel up through the cockpit into that, and will be charging during the day while I'm on the river. Vital piece of gear for me. I love it. I wish this box was a touch smaller, but I just get it up front. It's not an issue. Okay, behind the seat, I have several things, as I showed you. The other throw bag. One needs to be in front of you. If you have another one behind the seat, that's fine. Whatever day I'm paddling, my lunch is there, so I don't have to dig that out. I'm just using MRE in this instance. Bring whatever food you want. MREs for me are quick and easy. They're a little heavy, but when you eat them and they're gone, you throw the trash away. You got a lot more room and your boat's a lot lighter, so as the day goes on, you get happy. A bunch of bottled water. You don't want to get dehydrated. That's easier to do on the river than you think, because no one wants to stop and drink. People start getting dehydrated, so keep water handy. A pin kit. I do that in case we get a boat pinned on the rocks, and with my ropes I can work that and put a 3-to-1 pulley up and get that boat out, or break it in half trying one way or the other. This will give you an incredible advantage when you're applying force to a boat to get it out of a pin situation. Hopefully I'll never have to use that, but it's always in the boat, whitewater or in touring. Behind the seat are 3 Pelican boxes as well. Inside are, my cameras. This is my spare box with a bunch of charging gear, my third camera, and that sort of thing, a bunch of components. This is the main box. This has all my batteries, all my SD cards, my GoPro 7. I'll have the 8 up front, the 7 in the back, or vice versa, depending on what I'm doing. This has everything I need to quickly change things out during the day, and works out perfectly. And those are 1120s, and I have one more in here. Got my tag yak sticker on there because it's a black box and I couldn't Sharpie my information. So in this one I have another RAV Power, some batteries. There'll be a few more AA batteries in here, and whatever else you need to keep dry, to keep things going battery wise. Or, you know, sometimes people, hey, you've got a place I can stick my phone. I'll throw that guy right in here and it's good to go. That's everything in the cockpit, and there's a lot going on here. And I know that, but it works for me. If I was to ever swim, it might be an incredible yard sale. So it's important to note, anything in the front with you, in between your legs or up near your feet, it's important not to tether that off, not to tie it off, because if you need to get out of the boat, you don't want anything in there that could grab a foot or a piece of your clothing or gear or anything. You want to be able to come out of the boat if an emergency happens. Now here behind the seat, I'll run a little length of cord with a couple little carabiners, just make a loop and tie it into the hardware behind the seat, so that if I do swim and I'm flopping around, the important stuff will be still with the boat when I get the boat back. Otherwise, those boxes will float. It'll just take a little bit more time to find them, especially if the current is sufficient enough to flip you and make you swim and give you a lot of trouble. So just, you can tether behind the seat. Keep the front of your boat clean. No ropes, no tethers, no nothing. Whatever's in there needs to be able to come out with you or allow you to get out without the impediment of getting caught in a rope. Okay, so now we're to the back deck and the stern compartment area of the boat. And so right off the bat, you've noticed the solar panel, and that's the 17-watt voltaic system solar panel. Keeps all my electronics going. I've done it for hundreds and hundreds of miles on the river, close to 1,000. And it keeps everything going. So it just attaches to the deck line with the webbing and buckles, and it's got a waterproof little line there that has a connector, and I'll run the other line through the cockpit rim into that box, and that's what charges me all day. So it just connects with the little webbing and buckles to my deck lines, and that's the 17-watt panel, which gives me the ability to keep everything charged all day. This little connector here connects into a little line that runs through my cockpit up into the box. And so while I'm paddling during the day, this is receiving a charge. The voltaic battery in there can also process the signal from this and simultaneously charge other devices off that while it's charging. So I can charge both RAV Powers and that battery from this panel during the day while I'm paddling. In any case, at the end of each day, I'm 100% on power on all the devices, and that allows me at the end of the day to recharge all the GoPro batteries, my phone, the GPS, whatever else I need to charge. I can do that off the power banks indefinitely. And so it's a little bit of gadgetry, but it has kept me going for a week at a time, several times. And also on some other things I was doing, this would power me for 2 weeks at a time, several times a year. So I love the solar panel, very rigid, very durable, no issues with the panel, riding right there for all the River King trips. Good piece of gear. Right under that is my spare paddle, and this is another RPC3. This is the Adventure Tour. Slightly different take, but it's a same carbon layout. The smaller width of the blade allows you to pull less water, which gives you the ability to, kind of like a bike going up a hill with the right gear. You may pedal more, but you're not wearing yourself out. So you may paddle a little more strokes. You may not go quite as fast as if you're getting a full bite, but this can protect your shoulders, your arms, your elbows, any joints. It also won't wear you out quite as bad. So that's another option. I prefer the Performance Tour, but this is also a fantastic paddle. I have one of each, so I just use this as the backup. Always have a backup when you're on a river. It's the one piece of gear you're really kind of stuck with. Other than the boat, you need a paddle to get down the river more than anything else. So on my trips, everyone brings a spare paddle. It's on the packing list. Just bring your own spare paddle. Things happen. You can ask my Uncle Matt, who is out a little bit at sea, and the end of his paddle, granted it was not an RPC3, but the end of the paddle he was using fell off the shaft and left him with a one-sided blade, and he was fighting current, wind, and tide to get where he was going, and he did not have a spare paddle. And he started laughing because he always made fun of me for carrying this thing. And he suddenly realized that maybe it would be a good idea, and now he always carries one. So thanks to Uncle Matt for letting me tell the story, even though I didn't ask and you didn't know I was going to do that. It's just a good example of why I should always, always, always have a spare paddle. In my whitewater trips, either I'll have a 4-piece breakdown in the boat, or I'll have hand paddles stuffed under the bags in the back. Either way, you can break a paddle in any kind of water. Whitewater is definitely no different, and maybe even more likely. So I always have a spare paddle no matter what kind of paddling I'm doing. It's good business. That brings me to the Ram Mount, R-A-M, Ram Mount 24-inch pole that I put my GoPro tail boom on. And I like this because it screws into the deck. If I hit a log, I'm going under, or if the boat flips and this is interacting with the bottom of the water, or a rock, or anything else, a giant wave comes over or something, this will just move down without snagging, without breaking the boat, without breaking the camera. It's just gonna move. And if it's got enough pressure on it, it will break at the ball instead of breaking off the boat. In theory, I've never tested that, but that's kind of how it's supposed to work. But I have had this several times be bent down by sticks, overhanging trees, things like that. It's never caused me an issue, and I love the design. I can just stand it right back up, kind of adjust it however I want it, and I'm back in the money. Back paddling on the water without having to get out and figure out where it is. I also have the camera tethered always, and that wraps up alongside. This pole floats. So this pole right here should float the camera, but it doesn't matter. I've got it tethered to the boat. Anything you have on the boat, on the deck, tether it. Cameras, GPSs, whatever you don't want lost, a little tether. Be safe. There's no extra wrapping that goes in here. There's no cordage to be caught anywhere. You don't want to get yourself entangled in ropes hanging out everywhere. So the tether should be as small as possible, tucked away discreetly, but if you don't want to lose your camera, tether it up. The rear hatch is the same. You got your plastic cover and then a neoprene inner. That keeps it really dry. Great system. Right off the bat, I have a dry suit. The weather is kind of borderline for even needing that, and I thought about not bringing it, but just to be smart, since I had a little extra room because it's not that long of a trip, I'm just going to throw it in there anyway, and that way if I want it, I will have it. Water, I got plenty of water. On a trip like this, on a river like this, I plan to use all bottled water. The Catawba River runs along I-40 for quite a ways. It's picked up a lot of little cities and towns and municipalities. So there's going to be chemical contaminants, at least a possibility of that, in that river, and my filtration systems don't get that out. So once a river starts going through bigger cities, I stop drinking that water. If I'm way back country in a wilderness kind of environment, then I'll filter the water. When I get into lowland farm areas, valleys with a lot of agriculture, cities, roads, all that thing, there's all kind of chemicals that can leach into that water system. If I can get a feeder stream coming off a mountain that's pristine, then I'll filter that. But this river's not going to be that way. Still pretty clean water, but I'm just going to play it safe. Bottle all my water, so I've got all the water I need. Also have a camp chair, because nobody likes to sit in the sand or the mud after a long day of paddling. I've done it myself, and I went out and bought a camp chair. So always have my little camp chair. A little extra fuel for the jet boil, which is never a bad idea. Very important piece of gear here, folks. This is a boat repair kit, and inside I have some repair tape. You can get that at Lowe's. G-Flex plastic boat repair, some gloves, some zip ties, a Gerber tool in case I need to work screws or bolts or nuts. A little bit of everything in there to fix your boat. Another thing I have that's not in the bag but is very important is duct tape. And so I can fix paddles, boats, cracks, gouges. We fixed the gudgeon on Squirrel's Rudder on the New River once. If you're gonna be out there, you're sticking yourself out in the wilderness or just in an area where you're not gonna have access readily available to you to fix a boat. Basically, if you're on a good trip out in the wilderness, have a way to keep your boat repaired, because that's the difference between really enjoying something that takes about 2 hours to fix at the most, or maybe having to call the trip and get extracted. Just have a way to fix your boat. Several different options. Also have a couple more MREs for lunches on other days. I have two of these, top quilt, bottom quilt, and that's for the hammock. They are pretty light, and I've got them stuffed way back up in there. You may play around with where you pack everything yourself to achieve your the right weight for your boat where you've packed it all, and this works for me. The other bag I have in here is all the clothes I'm gonna have for this trip. And first off, there's no cotton. Everything I own, everything that's on this trip is gonna be quick dry. But in here is some silk weights to sleep in, a full change of everything for at camp. The silk weights will never be used except for sleeping. And I know with my quilts, the beanie in here, and the silk weights, no matter what happens to me over the course of the trip, each night I will sleep warm and dry. And that's a big thing. If you're mixing what you're wearing with what you're supposed to be sleeping in, and this gets wet, you're sleeping wet. So I always recommend one pair of clothes, and I use silk weights, which is like a kind of a polyester thin pajama kind of material, kind of spandexy. But they keep me warm and dry during the night, and it only gets used for sleeping. I take them off, I don't wear it during the day. And no matter what happens to me on the river over the course of a trip, every night I know, hey, I'm gonna sleep warm and dry, and that's a mental thing that'll keep you going. Also in here are a full change of pants, shirt. I got an Outdoor Vitals puffer jacket, a synthetic jacket. Like I say, I got the fleece beanie and a couple pairs of socks. And that's really all I'll need for this trip. Anything that I'm wearing, I can wear under here as well and stay warm and dry, but it's not really gonna be that cold of a weekend. And I usually overpack a little bit, but most of the time, all the clothes I bring fit in a bag like this. Sometimes during the winter, I'll have a second bag for just a couple items that are a little bit too bulky to go in there. So that's basically everything I take on a trip this time of year. It can vary a little bit depending on the weather, depending on the distance of the trip, but that's my breakdown. That's how I pack it, that's where I pack it, and it works out pretty good. One thing I haven't shown you that will be in this boat, and I'm about to go get it now, gotta go out and get some lunch. And while I'm out, I'm gonna get some snacks like Cliff Bars, granola bars, any kind of snacks like that. Applesauce, I like applesauce. Have those in your boat as well. You don't wanna run out of food. There's nothing worse than being hungry on a trip you're supposed to be enjoying. All right, so that is the current loadout I'm taking on this trip on the Catawba. 50 miles, 3 days. Some fun guys, the weather's not terrible, so should be a good time. This setup won't really change much, even if I'm going for a week or more at a time. Hot weather, cold weather, all I change is some insulation on the hammock, some clothing concerns, and maybe the tarp will change, you know, that sort of thing. Sometimes I bring an extra tarp if the weather's bad. If I missed anything, please comment below. If you have another way of doing things that is better, that you like better, or it's just something I've never tried, I'd love to hear about it. I'm always looking for new gear, new ways of doing things, new ways of using gear, and this is no exception. So please write that in the comments below. I hope this worked. I hope that explained everything, and thanks for watching.